A lot can change in a year. Your life, your priorities, the world. Your annual review is where we make sure your financial plan keeps up. Stay with us as we explore how to make the most of your annual review.
The information and opinions presented in this podcast, including the views of guests not affiliated with Measured Wealth, is for general, informational, and educational purposes only, and should not be considered investment, tax, or legal advice. Any references to specific securities, products, or services do not constitute a recommendation or endorsement. All investments involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Listeners should consult their own financial professionals before making any financial decisions. Measured Wealth Private Client Group is registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training.
Welcome to Financial Futures, a Measured Wealth podcast powered by the team at Measured Wealth in beautiful Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Each episode, we're bringing you fresh insights on retirement, investing, and everything you need to take control of your financial future. Whether you're preparing for retirement or already living it, we're here to help you make informed choices with confidence. To kick off today's conversation, here's your host, certified financial planner and chartered financial analyst, George Zaharopoulos.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Joe Neff. Joe is a certified financial planner. He's a colleague and returning guest. Joe, great to have you back. How are you?
Good to be back. I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing great. We have an exciting show today. We're talking about annual reviews. I'm going to throw it right at you. Why are annual reviews important?
Well, that all depends. How often are you talking to your advisor?
That's a good point. Go ahead.
I was going to say it should be more than once a year, especially if you're in a planning relationship. Right? There are definitely big enough things happening on a regular basis where even if you're just calling to check in or scheduling a time to check in maybe twice a year, get that mid-year check-in just to make sure everything's going all right, and then have a bigger meeting at some point in the year. My best bet would be to distribute those between, hey, sometime Q1, and then another time maybe in Q3, start of Q4.
Yeah,
because then you hit the tax opportunities, right? You get the end-ish of year tax idea in terms of capital gains and whatnot.
Right. Great time for an advisor to get with the client to get with the advisor, and really, I think the importance goes both ways. It allows the advisor to get updated on their situation. It allows the client to provide those updates to make sure that their plan is on track. So very important that everyone should be meeting with their advisor a couple times a year for these conversations. Before we go into aspects of a good financial review, a good annual performance / financial planning review, what are some of the things that make a financial review not as effective?
Oh, how do we start? I think it goes back to I'm going to skip a couple P's. Proper planning prevents poor performance. Right. So if you're gearing up to meet with your advisor, try to and I mean, I'm going to paint kind of an illustration of like the dream scenario here for an advisor, right? The dream is, hey, we send out an email saying it's time for us to do our annual review. We get an email back. They say, great, looking forward to it. And they say, here are some topics that I'd like to discuss. Here are some specific questions that I have. Can you be prepared to answer these? And we go, yes. How's Tuesday work? And then we get the statements, and the client sends over the statements, and we have more than an hour or two to review said statements. And then that meeting comes, and they're like friends coming in. We answer all the questions. We review some investments. We talk about their plan, talk about some opportunities going forward, and everything's all good. But all of that falls short when we go, hey, can we see that 401k statement? And then 30 minutes before the meeting, we finally get that 401k statement.
Yeah, some things you don't want to be uncovering during the meeting. Ideally, you'd like to have all of that up front, which can make the conversation more effective for clients, for the advisor. In our industry, it's quite commonplace for a lot of advisors to more focus on performance, rather than the planning aspects, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. So number one, for me, focusing too much on performance can kind of make the meeting more backward looking and less effective. Not revisiting goals and whether those goals have changed. So if we're, working with a client who had stated goals many years ago, but we haven't revisited what exactly those goals are and whether anything has changed, that can stifle productivity a little bit. And when an advisor really talks too much.
Wait, should we update our goals if our original goal was to start a family and now we have 4 kids?
Right. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, so all of that can really detract from a positive, productive meeting with your advisor, or a positive, productive meeting between the advisor and the client. But let's pivot. Let's talk more about what goes into a great annual review. Where do you want to start there?
Let's start with pre-meeting, right? So we send out an email, or one of our client service team sends out an email saying it's time to schedule your annual review, and we hear nothing back. Well, there's not going to be an annual review.
Right.
So some sort of response that way. And then if we say, hey, are there any questions that I can be prepared to answer for you? You say, no. Or you don't say anything at all, again, with the responsiveness. We're not going to have anything prepared for it. We're going to assume it's going to be a pretty rote meeting, which, is boring for the client, is boring for the advisor. Nobody leaves that happy. Mm-hmm. So having some questions, and there are stupid questions. I'm not going to say there aren't any stupid questions, but they're definitely few and far between.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be ideal to have all of that up front. Otherwise, having a thoughtfully prepared agenda can help uncover some of that stuff. And that agenda can focus on some key items to make sure that we cover during the meeting. For one, I think a big place to start is, hey, are there any changes in your life? Any big changes? Are you married, getting married, divorced, children, inheritances, any major expenses coming up? I think that's a good place to start. What do you think?
Yeah. Not being afraid to show excitement or sadness about a topic. You wouldn't believe the number of conversations I've had where I've had to pull it out of somebody that they're engaged. Mm-hmm. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of changes happen financially, and a lot of changes happen in just your real life when you get engaged. But for some reason, people will go, oh, yeah, I just did. I'm engaged now, and we're getting married in June. And it's like, that's a big deal, and that's going to affect recommendations. Mm-hmm. And hey, maybe we can send you a card or something.
It's going to affect your expenses too. So, but no, that conversation too can really bring about what changes in your time horizon might be coming up. Maybe you want to extend retirement a little bit. And part of this conversation is talking about your big picture income, but hey, how do we match your retirement with Social Security plus some other income that you're going to be having? That's a little further in the conversation, but knowing what's changed in the big picture can affect what risks you might be susceptible to. So that's going to be part of the conversation brought into the picture. A big one for me too is progress towards goals. Maybe that's not something you cover at the beginning. Maybe every advisor has their own strategy for the annual review, but I think ultimately a client wants to walk away feeling pretty confident about what they're doing. So showing them that they've made some progress since a year or two ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago since they started can really bring some confidence to them. But what else is on your list of things to cover with a client?
I think those things set the initial, right? Then we move through the plan. We make sure everything in there is up to date, so that when we're tooling it around in our heads and doing the math behind things, we're actually working with the right numbers. But I think the majority of the meeting should be on what opportunities there are going forward, or what obstacles that we have to navigate.
And that's something you identify when you circle back to the financial plan, right? You might look at cash flows in the future. What do things look like? Hey, you mentioned having a big major expense. Well, I can see that 3-4 years down the road, it's going to cause a shortfall. We need to look at what's going to come out of your portfolio. Where do we take it from? So I think it all circles back to the plan, and I think you got a point there.
Yeah, or even something like if you're a sales guy and you have a bad year and your income's down, right? Income's down. That's that stinks. But hey, can we take advantage of that to do a Roth conversion? Mm-hmm. Or maybe the government starts a war in the Middle East again and the markets are down. Hey, maybe now's a good time to consider a Roth conversion for those in retirement.
Right.
Do them in kind instead of selling the positions and doing it in cash.
And the fun part about progress is really seeing if your net worth is going up or at least trending up. So I think that's a key aspect as well. When you look into that financial plan, what also comes around? I mean, there's tax planning conversation. What do you address there?
Tax planning should be a year-round thing, right? There should always be something going on in the tax planning sector. Late in the year, I like to look at what capital gains been realized, if there's a tax loss harvesting opportunity. Maybe we can pull down from a concentrated position and do something to offset the gain we have to realize. You know, another thing is, and this comes up pretty often, right? U.S. citizens are pretty generous. Charitable giving. How do we effectively do that, right? Do we have to realize all the gain in a portfolio? Or if somebody's giving to their local church on a regular basis or local charities, can we take the cash that they would have contributed to the charity and give the charity an appreciated position or stock in an appreciated position?
Yeah, I know, especially with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that came out, there's been a few changes to charitable gifting. So revisiting that in the conversation is a big point. But yeah, all of this is lumped together, you know, especially when, you know, a client comes in and you're having that annual review conversation and, you know, you might not be going through the plan in thorough detail, or maybe you are, but hitting on some points. Hey, we've got this plan built. Let's just take a look at your cash flow into the future. Could be something, you know, quick, but then that leads to, hey, well, let's look at your taxes on this. You know, here's your estimated income. Here's where it's coming from. What opportunities do you have this year for tax planning purposes? Moving on to the big one, though, I think is really what most advisors focus on, which is the investment portfolio review. What is your philosophy around that?
I think if there are major changes coming up in somebody's life, maybe they're getting close to retirement and it's time to dial back the risk a little bit. Maybe we're going through a market downturn because of geopolitical affairs or something like that. I think the mistake that's made is when we focus too hard on how we did last year, right? We can't change that now. I think it should be mentioned, right? Because if somebody makes 17% in a year, that's a pretty good thing, right? So if we can remind somebody, hey, you made 17% last year, that it translates to this amount in dollars. That's a pretty big deal. You've accomplished something, right? Your net worth, like you said, your net worth tracking is getting some upward pressure. And then if we made any significant changes to the portfolio over that year, it might be worth talking about, but maybe it was just a typical rebalance and we don't need to address it for longer than 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also just to add to that, I think a performance review could highlight some underperformance if you're comparing to a benchmark. Maybe you have a portfolio that maybe you're managing on your own, or maybe you have a portfolio out there where your advisor is not only your financial planner, but he's also picking investments for you, which is something we do a little differently here at Measured Wealth. We actually have a CIO and an investment team that puts together the portfolios and oversees those portfolios. But elsewhere, there's a lot of advisors that are, you know, also the investment counselor, or they're also choosing investments. And so some advisors are wearing multiple hats, but that's not always, you know, the best for every client. And if they're choosing investments, you never know. They could be falling short of a benchmark in some years. They could be outperforming a benchmark in other years. But that takes into, then we have to do a deeper dive into what's in the portfolio. Why is there overperformance in some years? Why is there underperformance? So it could highlight a few things like that. Anything to add on that, Joe?
I mean, I always think it's funny when we're managing assets and somebody keeps some outside just to have heard, I want to see how you stack up before.
Yeah, heard that before.
Yeah. And it is kind of fun to, like, hey, this did 15% or this did 12%. How'd the other portfolio do? Mm-hmm. And, thankfully with Ed Miller at the helm and Craig backing him up, we usually do a bit better.
Yeah. We're in striking distance, and that's where you really need to be. And I think the key is not to really, focus solely on performance when it comes to an annual review. Mm-hmm. That's one piece, but it's not the entire review.
Yeah, I'd take it a step further and say that investment performance, while you want good investment performance, having your investments match your plan, mm-hmm. right? Because it's a means to an end. It's not, you're not putting a bunch of money away to go like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, right? Mm-hmm. You have a goal at the end. You want to retire. Maybe you want to spend $150,000 a year. Well, your investments for a little while are probably going to have to be pretty growth oriented. You're going to have to put a lot in them, but it's just one piece of that bigger plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brings out the importance of asset allocation and risk planning versus returns. Yeah. So, absolutely.
I like how I'm talking with my hands when I'm on a video. That's good.
Other items to address during an annual review.
Oh, we got to check in on good old death. Mm-hmm. Beneficiaries and estate planning, right? If your estate planning hasn't been updated in 5 or so years, just do a quick check-in on that, make sure everything's good. POAs tend to be a problem, powers of attorney, just because they can go stale and different custodians may or may not like ones that are older than 5 years. So it's important to check with your one-year investment advisor because they know the custodian probably a little better, and then talk to your estate planning attorney, or if you use a service for your documents, make sure that we're running them through our wealth.com platform to make sure they're up to date and still nothing's changed. The state hasn't changed any regulations on how they have to be written, or maybe you've moved to Florida, as a lot of New Englanders do.
Well, we find so many examples of when someone creates estate planning documents like trusts, but some accounts don't get updated as far as titling goes. Beneficiaries is something that needs to be reviewed on an annual basis. More importantly, how do you want your assets to be distributed upon your death? I mean, it's something we have to think about. It's not what everyone really wants to think about, but it's just something that we need to address.
Yeah, so we're covering two of the two permanent things in life during your annual review: death and taxes.
Yeah. The other piece to that is actually longevity. What if we live a long time? Well, actually, first with death, there's risk management, and what comes with that is, are you adequately insured? So determining whether you have the right amount of life insurance, disability, long-term care, things like that. But then the longevity aspect, which also comes into the risk management play, is maybe annuities. So I know part of our planning process is to really look at, hey, what does your secure income look like in the future? Is it on the lower side versus your expenses? Do we need to factor in increasing your secure income? Or, do we need some downside protection from the market if your risk tolerance was on the conservative side? So those all come into play as well. Final thoughts on rounding out a good annual review, Joe?
I think just making sure that you're preparing for the review, both sides, making sure that you get to the meeting and you stay for the meeting. Don't cut out early. If you can't be there for an hour, don't schedule an hour, right? Want to make sure that we're preparing for the appropriate time frame, and then have the detailed action items after, right? Advisor and client should both have things that they are responsible for doing, leaving a meeting. So if you're updating a beneficiary on your outside accounts, that's going to fall to you. Mm-hmm. If we need to update beneficiaries with the accounts you hold with us, that's on us. We're going to get you those forms. Right?
Yeah, I think that's that's the perfect way to close an annual review. Outline those action steps. Who's doing what? Does anything need to change? Maybe we need to update a plan. Maybe we need a statement. Maybe there's a beneficiary update that needs to be made. Absolutely. We could be entering the stage where we're setting up a withdrawal strategy. So, a lot of action items could take place from an annual review. So I think we covered it all. Well, Joe, thanks again for joining me today. This was a great conversation. Exciting stuff, annual reviews. I know we covered a lot. I just want to outline a few takeaways. A good annual investment review should focus on decisions rather than performance, should tie your life goals to your investments, and really leave a client feeling confident knowing that everything's being addressed as far as the question, are we still on track? And if not, what needs to change? If you have questions or would like to run through this process with either Joe or myself, give us a call. We would look forward to hearing from you. And with that, Joe and everyone, thank you again for joining me today. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Financial Futures, a Measured Wealth podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an update. Want to learn more or get in touch? Head over to measuredwealth.net, where you'll find prior episodes, helpful financial planning guides, and more. You can also call us at 603-431-1444 or email at info@measuredwealth.net. That's info@measuredwealth.net. Thanks again for listening, and remember, the future will someday be the present.